Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show, by any host, or by any guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before you begin any new diet, exercise, or training program. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. On Healing Ties, we're creating a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories and resources and being with awesome people like you. Now that caregiving has ended, let the Healing Ties begin. Here's your host, Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy, for another episode. Well, not just one episode. We're going to have 6 episodes. It's our new 6-series podcast featuring mature market expert, author, and keynote speaker, Joy Loverde. Joy, thanks for joining me here on these next 6 weeks. Goodness, it's great to visit with you again.
I'm absolutely delighted, Chris.
So you're coming from Chicago, and I'm in South Florida, but with the marvels of the internet, we can have these wonderful conversations that hopefully will be helpful and impactful for people who are especially in the midst of caregiving.
Right. It's going to affect everybody in all 4 corners of the world.
And so over the next 6 weeks, we've got a number of topics. And some of those, I guess really most of those are really kind of a reflection of your terrific work that you've done in the mature market industry and caregiving. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about your background? And then we could chat about how you and I met. That would be awesome as well.
Sure. My background is in communication. And early on, I discovered that many of the needs of caregivers of all ages have to do with communicating to the people they care for, and also having the people who are being cared for communicating their needs to the caregiver. So I found early on that if we applied good communication skills to the process, things would go much smoother.
And that's one of the many areas you and I connect in as it relates to caregiving and communication. We've talked before. I look at this vast network of caregiving through the lens of leadership and communication. That's why it's just so looking forward to these next 6 weeks and chatting with you. And you know, the title that you selected for our podcast series is The Unique Needs of the Older Caregiver. And some of the topics over the next 6 weeks. Today we're going to be talking about Meet Your Future Self. Week 2 is Goodbye Change, Hello Transition. Week 3 is Thriving in times of uncertainty. We certainly know in caregiving there's a lot of uncertainty. Number 4, money and the needs of older caregivers. Goodness, I can get in touch with that one 100%. Housing and the needs of the older caregiver, and the legal needs of the older caregiver. I think you've covered all 4 pillars. Goodness, that's very good.
We need to always remember, if we are getting closer to the possibility of integrating our lives as an older adult with the process of caregiving, we've got to have our mind in 2 places at once. So that's not easy to do. And that's what we're going to be talking about these next 6 weeks.
So today, we're going to meet our future self. And I think I just have been looking forward to that because, as you know, I hope all of my listeners know, I'm an after caregiving. Caregiving ended for me 4 years ago. Meeting my future self before we got to caregiving was something that I just really wasn't in touch with. So can you tell our listeners, really, what do you mean by meeting your future self?
Well, I just need to make a comment, Chris, about something you just said.
Okay.
You mentioned that your caregiving responsibilities ended about 4 years ago. And I would like you to consider that some good friend, some neighbor that you absolutely love, someone you work with, someone you care a lot about may be landing on your doorstep without you even realizing that you are immediately back in that role of being a caregiver. And this is one of the unique needs of the older caregiver. And the reason is because everybody else around us is aging. So I'm a firm believer that says we may never put our guard down. We may always and forever be caregivers until we can't caregive anymore.
Oh, that's very well said. And I think for me, as I back on such a wonderful experience, I'm pretty sure somewhere down the road I'll be a caregiver again.
So that's a unique need of an older caregiver. Younger caregivers don't necessarily have that because their friends aren't getting old at the same time. It will happen with more frequency for the older caregiver.
As we project into the future, especially for the older caregiver, it's not necessarily assured that your kids are going to be there to care for you, or you may not have kids yourself.
Well, we certainly didn't raise our children the way our parents raised us. We are probably the last generation of caregivers, family caregivers as we know it. And those of us who have children are not expecting them to be there at our beck and call when we need them. That's not how we raised them. We raised them to be educated and smart and independent, and we said, get out there and conquer the world. Now, our parents didn't necessarily give us that message, but as parents, we probably say, well, I know my children love me, but they may not be able, they might not even be in the neighborhood to take care of us. So then what?
Oh, goodness. You bring up another topic that we could certainly do a number of shows on, long-distance caregiving, because families are across the country. They're not just local. I think of my siblings. 3 of them have lived in St. Louis their entire life, but the other three of us have moved on to other cities. It just poses a lot of problems, especially when you're trying to coordinate care.
I see the situation as reality. And I don't pose it as a problem because my expectations are it is up to me to begin the process of creating a support network that works for me. So it's more the reality of what you're talking about. And so is that a problem or is that reality? That's our future self right there. You just nailed it, Chris.
And one of the components about our future self, and I return the favor, you just nailed it as well. It is creating a support network.
Right. And this is the future self. So if we all get on the same page and say, okay, this is the real deal here. Where do we go from here? And that's what we have to do. We just have to say, okay, this is the situation. This is reality. Plan from reality, not wishes and hopes and thinking that our siblings or our children are going to come to our rescue, because there's a good chance they won't. It's not that they don't love us. It's just that this is the real world.
Right. I think I'm thinking back to some of those old phrases that my parents used to say, and probably your parents said the same thing. Well, in my day, it wasn't like this.
We become our parents.
We become our parents. There's a couple of great commercials out right now about that, about we become our parents. But I think especially when it relates to caregiving, and I look back at my mother taking care of her mother and what that instilled in me. And I'm thankful that I'm confident that I got my care gene from my mother and my 4 sisters. But with that, when you're planning for yourself and when you've been in the midst of taking care of somebody else, you kind of forget the most important person in this plan is ourselves.
Right. And that's just it's human nature. That's the nature of caring about so many others. Also, I just want to mention there's a guilt factor in there somewhere, right? Old-fashioned guilt. That's the elephant in the room. We can't be in 2 places at once. No one can. And if you know the secret to that, let me know what that is. So what happens is we tend to overcompensate because we may feel guilty if something happens to the person we love. So that guilt factor is something we all have to deal with. Incredibly powerful.
It is very much so, because our caregiving capes are limited. And if we're not taking care of ourselves first, it really makes the situation more difficult than it already is.
I couldn't agree more.
Good. So one of the many terrific things that you wrote in your book, and I'd like to see if we can chat just a little bit about this. It comes in your first chapter. I envision my future self is evidence-based. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
I can. So I don't dig my head in the sand when I am in the presence of old people who are maybe struggling and dealing with chronic conditions of one kind or other. Instead of saying that'll never happen to me, and if I exercise and I eat right, that'll be I can avoid that. That is not the way to go. What I say is evidence of people who are aging actively in spite of their aches and pains. How are they doing that? I look for answers that give me evidence that I can age actively in spite of the challenges that my future self might meet. So gathering clear-cut information is the way that I proceed in this whole process. And that's what I mean by evidence-based. Reality versus that'll never happen to me.
Reality versus that will never happen to me. Goodness, that's very profound.
Yeah, it's hard to do, and it's hard to see, and it's hard to watch. But if you don't pay attention to reality and some of the answers that the old people are giving us right now, then things may not go as well as you expect them to go later on.
So, Joy, I think this is a great time to take our break. And when we come back, I'd like to discuss a little bit more about the concept that you just mentioned, age actively. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, so you're listening to The Unique Needs of the Older Caregiver on Healing Ties. We'll be right back.
Everyone has a story, but not everyone gets a chance to tell their story. On the Whole Care Network, we are all about story sharing. That's why on the Whole Care Network, you talk and we listen. For information on how you can share your story on the Whole Care Network, contact me, Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy, at chris@wholecarenetwork.com. To your health, happiness, and prosperity.
Are you an older family caregiver? Are you managing the care of a partner, siblings, or aging parents? Caring for aging individuals brings about a lot of questions regarding your own future care. I'm Joy Loverde, author of The Complete Elder Care Planner and Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old. I hope you join me and Chris for this 6-part series on the unique needs of the older caregiver.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And Joy, we were just talking about what actually you had just mentioned about a concept that I want to get into a little bit more. Age actively. Goodness, I think I know what that means, but I kind of want to hear it from the expert.
Well, you know what? It's probably something that's unique to every older caregiver. In my case, I pay a lot of attention to what is going on with the care receiver, whether it's a parent or a sibling or friend that I am caring for. As an older caregiver, what I'm doing is I'm looking for different clues and things that could happen and look forward to making plans for the different needs of a person who is on the receiving end of the care. So aging actively to me is keeping my eyes wide open and assessing at the same time that I'm caring for someone, is this the way I would do that? Is there something different that I would do? Who do I need to talk to about this for me? So caregiving, active aging, and in the process of a older caregiver is you're doing two things simultaneously at the same time. So that is active aging, and that's just one aspect of active aging, but it's an important one. Pay attention to what's going on.
Well, you You bring up an area that I've often reflected on, and something that I know in my caregiving experience I didn't do very well, because caregiving just happens. Nobody really plans for it, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of it, and not only are you involved in something that you may not really know or understand, you kind of lose yourself in your own self-care. And before you know it, you've got 30, 40 pounds on you, or you don't remember what your hobbies are. And that's why this topic is so important about planning ahead. If you can, just to kind of relieve some of the stress that might be upon you.
Chris, I've been talking about planning for caregiving for 30 years. And even though some of us are caught off guard by being a caregiver, we can catch up pretty quickly with all the resources that are available to us. And the first thing to do is to surround yourself with experts. You're right that we could say all of a sudden we find ourselves in a highly stressful situation. But my experience has been it's typically because we haven't also sought out resources at the same time that could help us get up to speed quickly. So again, this is a matter of okay, stopping, taking a deep breath, and then going forward in a smart way. Otherwise, we sabotage our own well-being. And it is possible for every caregiver, young and old, to stop and take a deep breath and say, okay, I need help.
Oh, because asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's really a sign of strength.
Absolutely. And boy, will you and all the caregivers who, you meaning the audience, you will be pleasantly surprised on how you align yourself with an expert. So someone at a hospital, the doctor, the person who is managing the rehab center, you begin the process of talking with experts, and they will ask you questions, probably ones that you've never asked yourself,
right,
that will help you unravel all the confusion, and it will help you focus on, I have a theory. There's a want to have and there's a need to have, and I separate those two. It's almost when I'm caregiving, I've got two things going on. I'm constantly assessing: do I need to do this, or is it just that I want to do it? And all the want to do it go to the side, and that's how it helps me get so. We have to find ways to get that stress down, and this is one of the best ways to do it. Do I need to do this, or do I want to do it?
I like that. I had not that. I can certainly get in touch with that. And if I could add just one other thing to that, it's almost like setting a daily intention for yourself as a caregiver to take care of yourself, whether it's 5 minutes a day of meditation or reading or reaching out to an expert. Have some me time so that you can plan for your future self.
When as a caregiver, Chris, it's always me time for me. It's always me time. I come first. And in that process, I'm able to be the best caregiver to the person I'm caring for. I go first. I say, is this good? Is this a good thing to be doing right now? And then I go for that. Because it's so easy to get off the track. So easy.
Yeah, I think we often lose sight that really the first person that should be cared for in this situation is the caregiver, because if you're not taking good care of yourself, it's hard to take good care of the person that you're caring for.
And you know what? I understand that people don't have time to exercise and do the things that would be wonderful for us. I'm more or less talking psychologically what has to go on in my mind
Right.
and what has to come out of my mouth. This is the first way I take care of myself, and that is what is my attitude toward the situation that's right front and center right now, and who can help me with this. That's the only place I come from when things are just crazy.
Right. It's taking that time for self-reflection and kind of asking yourself the questions that are pertinent to your own health and well-being. But goodness.
Yeah. You think about the older caregiver, which I am one of, is I can't afford to get sick. I can't afford to do myself in. I can't. That would be bad.
And we've heard numerous stories, and there's tons of different statistics out there about caregivers who get ill and pass on before their caree, and that in and of itself is a reality that comes from not taking care of ourselves. So before we close our first episode, goodness, this is I'm enjoying this, Joy. I hope you are too.
I am.
What are some questions older caregivers need to ask about elder care?
My first question, and it's always been my first question, is who's going to pay for care? And we are going to be talking about the money needs of the older caregiver. But the first question is who's going to pay for all this? And you talk about taking good care of yourself. You need to know the answer to this question. And it isn't just, somebody's got money in the bank. There's all kinds of ways to pay for care. There's all kinds of unexpected expenses that come up. My question is right out of the gate, who's going to finance this longer life, both the person I'm caring for and my own?
Because there is a cost factor to this, and with just most things in life today, a lot of it comes down to finances and money, and we're going to be getting into that topic in week 4. But Joy, we just got a couple of minutes left in our first episode. Could you let our listeners know how they can touch base with you online and contact you?
Sure, it's real easy. I have a website, and everything you need to know about me or about places to go and resources is on my website. And that address is elderindustry.com.
elderindustry.com, and really appreciate you talking about your 2 books too. Your 2 books are available on your website?
They are available wherever books are sold around the world. So the 2 books are the Complete Elder Care Planner. It's now in its 6th edition, and it offers
congratulations.
Tips and checklists and worksheets. And then the other book that just came out is called Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old? And this book will change the course of your life. Whether you're living solo or with a family, you do not need to be alone in old age unless you want to be.
Oh, goodness. We're going to get into some terrific conversations over the next 6 weeks. Joy, I appreciate you joining me today on our first episode of The Unique Needs of the Older Caregiver. Thanks so much, Joy, for joining me.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to next week's episode entitled Goodbye Change, Hello Transition. We want to thank you for listening, and we welcome your comments and feedback. Send us an email at wecare@wholecarenetwork.com. I'm your host, Chris McClellan, the Bowtie Guy. I'm creating a life to love after caregiving ends through radio, writing, travel, advocacy, and being with awesome people like Joy Loverde. Healing Ties and the Unique Needs of the Older Caregiver are part of the Whole Care Network. Visit us online at thewholecarenetwork.com, where you can meet our show host, listen to all our shows, especially our special podcast series featuring Joy Loverde. Make it a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.